Hey everybody, welcome back. Another live Thursday night of Up North Journal Live in the Cabin.
Thursday night, and we're back.
We're 2 minutes late. Why are we late? Were you late getting here?
No, it's that proverbial, hey, we got an update for you, but we're not going to tell you.
Yeah, Facebook, once again, moved something around. It took me a few minutes to find out how to...
Right? It's like...
It's just leave the thing alone when it works, you know what I'm saying?
For more than a month?
Yeah.
It seems like every 90 days, 90 days, it's like, uh-oh.
And the thing was, there was no way to know where it was at. I just got lucky and clicked on it and found it, so.
Right, exactly.
That's the way it goes. All right. All right, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Allen, Mr. Coleman, and Miss Delk. All right, everybody's starting to pile into the cabin.
Pile in the cabin, because we got a good show tonight.
All right. Okay. You ready to get this thing kicked off here, Danny? You got something you can do there?
Ready.
You got everything all set over there?
Looks like it. There it comes.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to start my
good.
Sure here,
Yep.
and then we will get rocking and rolling tonight.
I wonder if I can do mine.
What do you mean, if you could? You should be able to.
Well, there's the proverbial could and should thing, right?
Right. All right. So, hopefully everybody's had a good week this week. We had some good weather, some warm weather finally, enough to knock the ice and snow off the driveways. But I tell you what, we got some cold weather coming in here, and it's going to be nasty, I think, here towards the middle of next week. So,
right?
It's January.
It is January. Is that Clover Beach in Linden?
I believe so. You talking about the ice fishing tournament?
Yep, they're out there fishing away.
Oh, is that coming up?
Well, I think it's coming up, but I saw them out there today when I drove by there.
Okay. All right. Mr. Allen says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, right back to you."
Right.
All right, let's get going here, and I'm going to start the record.
All right,
stand by. 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to another episode of the Up North Journal, everybody. I'm host Mike Adams, sitting in the cabin tonight with Dan DeFaw. A nice, somewhat warm evening.
30s.
It's in the 30s.
We got to be liking it.
Not for long. It's
supposed to be in the teens, I think, this weekend.
So, did you have a good week?
I did have a good week. It's been a busy week with that real work thing.
Yeah, work gets in the way.
But kind of excited. I saw the new video.
Yeah.
PSC.
Yeah, did you like that?
I like that little bow.
Man, I cannot wait till they get him down there at sunrise so we can take some and do some shooting with him.
Right. It'll be interesting to shoot those.
I tell you what, if you know what we're talking about, scroll down the page after we're done with the show tonight and take a look at PSC's new offering for the 2022 hunting season. Their
Absolutely.
New hunting bow. So, but I tell you what, let's take care of the people who take care of us, Dan.
Absolutely. You know, ladies and gentlemen, Buck Baits has got their brick and mortar store, Deer Camp Outfitters, down at 15 in Dodge Park in Sterling Heights, Michigan. And if you can get down there, go check it out because they got a large selection and they are adding things every day. I seen a post by them. They actually have camel meat now.
Camel
meat.
I didn't know that was a thing.
It is at Deer Camp.
Okay.
But anyways, if you're going to shop online and if you go to buckbaits.com and you use the promo code UNJ20, you'll get 20% off your order.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? A lot of people I see out there, Chris Kreiner and Paul and those guys, they're out coyote hunting. And why not go over to JPO Game Calls and check out their calls? And if you use the promo code UNJ10, you can get 10% off your order when you check out.
Check out their Omni system. That is incredible. It's a very versatile call system. Just go check it out.
That's right. And I tell you what, it's right here. We're drinking. What are we drinking?
Tonight, Wall Hanger.
Wall Hanger.
2 weeks in a row.
Oh, there we go. Deer Camp Coffee. Go to deercampcoffee.com. Use the promo code UNJ10. You'll get 10% off your coffee order when you check out.
And don't forget, we do have our own coffee blend through Deer Camp. It is the medium roast, so go over and check it out. You can see the label right there
and
up on the screen.
If you shoot over to my screen real quick, we can take a quick peek up in Newberry.
I gotta find it.
Oh, we gotta find Newberry.
No, I gotta find that link. I don't know where that link went.
Oh, but if you go
trust us, it's there.
Yeah, if you go up to Newberry, they do have Deer Camp Coffee up there. At Cedars. They got a great pizza. Check it out.
Big shout out to FM 123 for carrying the show for us as well.
Right, exactly. And don't forget, folks, when you're looking up Deer Camp coffee, check out Up North Journal Blend.
There you go. All right, is that it?
That's it.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and let's just get into it tonight. I'm going to bring Mr. Friedrich's mic up. Bill, how you doing tonight all the way from West Bloomfield, Michigan, just down the road a piece?
Yeah, it's great to be here tonight with you guys, and we got some mild weather today, so it's a pretty nice day for January here.
Yeah, especially here in Michigan. I mean, we could have feet of snow, but we're only got what, a couple, 3-4 inches, maybe at the most. If that. Gotta like that. Driveway, I can see the concrete on my driveway now, so everything's good. It's other than it being a little cold, got the cold weather coming in. But I tell you what, I feel sorry for the people who are going to be south, east, and west of Michigan, because this storm is coming down through Wisconsin, through Indiana, Ohio, and back up, and going to be a nor'easter. So Michigan, we got this little shield around us, and we're going to stay away from all this bad weather.
Nice.
Gotta like that. But we've talked about Bill on the show here for last week, and told you we were going to have him on, and I talked about him a little bit when I was up at Dan's camp doing some bow hunting, and he wrote a book. So that's what we got you on here tonight for, Bill, and talk about your deer camp as well, Singing Hills. I've never been there, but I feel like I have after reading the book and some of the stories and pictures you shared with us.
Well, Mike, I definitely want to get you up there this fall and let you experience it firsthand, but any chance to talk about deer hunting or a book I wrote on a cold summer or cold winter day like this is something I'm all up for.
Hey, it's always good to swap hunting stories and talk about camp and deer and anything in the outdoors. It's always a good time, I tell you. If we could, Dan, show the book here that we got here. This is the book he wrote. This is called That Hunting Camp, and it showcases Bill's camp from 1939. Is that when you guys established the camp, or your grandfather established the camp?
Yeah, my grandfather bought the property in the early 30s, but he actually had the camp built by a hermit that lived up in the area in 1939. So we're going on over 80 years now.
Wow. 80 years, that's about the same length of time as the camp that I belong to. I believe they were 1939, 1940, right there about the same time. And you think about back that far back, there was no I-75 going up through there. There was no paved M33 or M65 going north. I mean, back in the early days, you said you were born in Rogers City, right?
Yep.
So what was it like going to camp as a youngster?
It was the most exciting thing in my life. My earliest memories are, when I was probably about 3 years old, going out there, and my grandfather had built a trout pond out there, and he had a natural trout stream that flowed through the area, and he had a pond dug out, and he used to plant brook trout in there. And my passion as I got, from probably 3 to age, almost high school age, was to go out there and fish trout. And, all the fond memories of my life, just so many of them just come from being out there as a kid.
Yeah. Isn't that great that you have those memories of an exciting time in your young life when, I remember it for myself going up to camp. It was our camp was in the UP. But yeah, that going up there was just awesome.
So looking back as a youngster with a trout pond and cutting your teeth that way, I know the stories because I've read the book, but we want to talk a little bit. You really didn't get to spend time there hunting as a youngster as much as you did fishing, because if I remember right, it was a little bit later in life before you actually got the opportunity to go out deer hunting.
Yeah, it was. I had a bit of an unusual childhood in that my mother passed away when I was 3, and I was living in a town up there called Rogers City, which is only about 25 miles from our camp. But when my mom passed away for stories that I go into in the book. I ended up living down in Dearborn with my grandmother and my uncle, who was unmarried at the time, and I grew up in the Dearborn area. I would spend my summers up with my dad, usually several weeks at a time here and there, any vacations. I was that kid that if there was any opportunity to get up to camp, I wanted to get there, and I used to be pretty innovative in figuring out reasons why I needed to get there. But the culture of the hunters back then was a little bit different than what we do now and what I support, which was the fathers and their friends hunted opening week, and their children were not allowed to come out until the second week or Thanksgiving weekend, most commonly, because I was in school. Mm-hmm. So there was a whole group of us, rat pack of kids, if you want to call it, that would spend time out there on those Thanksgiving weekends, raising hell and having fun and shooting BB guns and doing all kinds of stuff. But unfortunately, we didn't see a lot of deer back then, because if anybody's hunted in northern Lower Peninsula, the actual deer hunting, especially back then when they didn't practice some of the stealth and things that we do today, the hunting fell off pretty quickly to a point where by about the second week of season, you were lucky if you saw very many critters.
Yeah. I remember cutting my teeth when I was a youngster, and I'd go squirrel hunting with my dad. I wasn't allowed at camp either. I mean, they hunted state land back at that time. And it wasn't until I was probably 12, 13, 14 before I actually got to go in the woods and him start to show me a little more woodsmanship about the deer and how to pursue them and things of that nature. But yeah, it was, it's like, when can I go, Dad? When can I go? So I do understand that. But in the book, go ahead.
Yeah, he would take me out when I was, about that age and sit with him. And it would usually be that second week of season or the last few days around Thanksgiving. And so he taught me, the basics of hunting. But a lot of the other boys that were up there at the time, I longed to get a chance to be out there opening day. And I didn't actually hunt my first opening day until the year my father passed away when I was 28.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, you think about all the time you spent there, and it was 28 until you got out that first time. What was that like? That I know the story behind it, but talk a little bit about that first time going out. What was that like? You being out there and having your first opening day. Was there that anticipation, excitement, or was it a little different for you?
Well, it was definitely anticipation and excitement. But following my dad's death, which occurred in the winter of that year, I decided that I was going to go up for the first time. And there was a group of about 10 guys. Most of them I knew fairly well. But there were a few guys that had hunted there, even with my grandfather and my father and my uncles, that I wasn't too familiar with. And I got up there, and I didn't really have a place to hunt. I didn't have a blind or anything. So my first chance was I got up in the morning, and I started walking toward a spot that I had basically targeted and was going to sit in front of a tree. And I was carrying my dad's old 32 Winchester Special with about a 4-power scope he bought from Kmart. And I tripped on the way there and fell into a ditch. So you can tell I was an experienced great hunter right from the early days. And I got to my spot after about a half-hour walk, and as soon as I got there, it just started pouring rain. So I sat there for about 20 minutes, and the rain wasn't letting up. And I decided I got to find somewhere with a roof. So there was an old blind on a large field not too far away, and I knew nobody was in it, so I decided to go sit in there. And as luck has it, it probably wasn't more than 20 minutes if I'd been sitting in here. The rain finally started to slow down, and I look out, and there's a group of does out there, and I was all excited. I heard a snort, and from over the ridge came one of the bigger bucks I've seen out there in my life. And this buck came in, and he was checking the does, and I just had a perfect shot. I put the gun up, got the crosshairs behind the front shoulder, pulled the trigger, and the deer ran away. and I assumed I must have hit him. And after about an hour looking with a couple of friends, we realized that I hadn't hit him. So I went back to camp, and I was complaining about it, had some lunch, and they suggested I go to a different spot in the afternoon. I went to a different spot. It was snowing at the time, and a spike buck came out, and that was back in the days when myself and pretty much everybody else out there shot any legal deer we saw. And so the spike buck came out, again, centered the sight right on the front shoulder, missed him. So I came back to camp that night. I was despondent, I was mad at myself. And my uncle Louis was there, and he said, well, let me see that gun you're using, Bill. And he took the gun, he took a look at it, and he touched the scope, and the scope was shaking back and forth on the gun. And we found out, of course, that was because of the fact that I had taken a header into the ditch on the way there.
Knocked it loose.
So long story short, the good news is I saw 2 bucks on my first day hunting, missed them both, and that set the stage for even being more determined in years to come.
Well, you know, I want to throw a picture up here real quick. If you and your dad, I mean, you're a youngster here, you know. I know it's right around 1979 because I see the license plate on the rear of the one car, and I remember that plate was from the year 1979. And you know, you as a young lad, you know, you said 28 when you went out for that first hunt right after your dad passed.
Right.
You were the leader of the camp. You kept the camp going. You know, as a 28-year-old, shouldering that kind of responsibility. What was that like? You know, I mean, obviously you had enthusiasm about it and you wanted to keep it going, but, you know, talk a little bit about some of that angst or struggle that you went through to keep that thing running.
Well, I actually had an advantage in that when my dad passed at my age was 28, his brother, who lived in Midland at the time and worked for Dow Chemical, was still alive and was still hunting there. So it wasn't as if I had to make all the decisions for the camp immediately at 28. But then years later, he passed away, and I was in my 30s at that time. And that's when it really kind of all came down to me. And it was difficult. There were a group of guys there that had started hunting, many of them with my grandfather. They had hunted there longer than I had. Mm-hmm. And you guys are hunters. You know that hunters tend to be pretty opinionated and have pretty strong feelings. And there was definitely some resentment about, you know, me being the person that was making decisions and at times having to go against some of the things they wanted to do. So it was definitely a challenge. And, you know, as most people would, there were some things that I wanted to change. And I'll tell you, one of the first ones is the folks, the old timers, as I would refer to them, they smoked cigarettes in the cabin from the morning when they got up until they went to bed. And the cabin would literally just smell like smoke 24/7. And of course, you talk to those guys about it, they would tell you, the deer, they don't care about that, you know. I'm in a blind, they can't smell me anyway, which is a bunch of baloney. But try to tell that to a 65-year-old hunter that's been hunting, you know, longer than you've been alive, and that's a tough conversation to have. So we started doing a few things a little bit differently, and there was definitely resistance, and there was times when it was a little uncomfortable, but we got through it, and you know, over time, we really do have had a good group of people there, and it's been so much fun.
Yeah, it reminds me back when at our camp when we started doing you know, herd management and taking and harvesting the does, and you know, trying to put a number on what we wanted to take for does. And as you well know, up in that area up there, there's a lot of resistance of shooting does. And I had a lot of people mad at me for trying to bring that in and try to get that, you know, started. And once we've got it going now, the people who are with us now, they do understand it. But like you say, you know, that resistance, it's hard to change mindset, especially with older hunters. You know, people who were set in their ways. I couldn't imagine the look on their face if you told them, "Yeah, we're not going to smoke in here anymore."
Yeah, it wasn't an easy conversation, and I think probably after I left the cabin, there were a few four-letter words muttered about who's this young kid telling us what to do. But like I say, when you own the camp, you do have some ability to install those things. And I certainly didn't want to chase those guys away. They were good guys. They helped me a lot over the years. I learned a lot from them. But I also was trying to bring the camp into the 21st century a little bit. And, you know, there were other things like you mentioned does. In my dad's group, they never shot does, period. They would shoot the first legal buck they saw, which oftentimes was a spike. And kind of the mentality was, you know, get your buck as soon as you can, and then, you know, play cards and drink and have fun the rest of the season. A lot of the guys wouldn't even go out after they got their spike buck. And so the same thing that you mentioned, Mike, when we get to things like herd management discussions and the need to take some does and timber harvest. Timber harvest was another area with a lot of resistance. We have literally, we have 600 acres up there, and we literally have thousands of oak trees. And thinning those oak trees out is good for the forest. But boy, I'll tell you, there's some people up there that believe that
you don't touch the floor. You don't touch it.
Yeah, you're just absolutely doing the worst thing you could possibly do. So yeah, it's there's an education process about it, and people are coming around, and in our camp, they embrace now you know, we don't shoot anything less than 8 points, and we basically harvest quite a few more does than bucks, and we do deer surveys, and we try to manage the herd as best we can.
Well, you know, and you got to be a good steward of the land, especially when you're the one that's in control of it. You know, nobody's going to take care of it except you. So, but I tell you what, that's a good spot right now, I think, for our first break here. We're running just a little bit long, so we're going to step outside real quick, take our first break. We come back. I want to talk a little bit about probably about the book and maybe why you got into writing about the camp itself. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, everybody.
And if you got any questions for Bill, throw them in the chat, and we'll ask them when we get to them. And you're right. Even my brother says it. Our guys used to tack all the doe tags on the wall and not use them.
Well, and there's still a lot of that mentality, you know. And honestly, you know, I'm not here to try to tell somebody how to run their camp or anything, but you know, if that's the way you want to hunt, that's the way you want to hunt. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like you said, Bill. You know, they'd shoot their first spike horn that came across, their first legal buck, and then they would hang out, you know, and sit back, play cards, eat, drink a little bit, have fun, and you know, and deer camp's supposed to be relaxing. So
that's right. You're supposed to enjoy it.
I think the point is it's not to criticize what other people got out of the camp and their camp experience. Every camp is different, and I totally agree. You know, it's up to the members how they want to run things.
And I think, like you said, education.
Yes, and I will say, because I belong to a hunting club, for those of you who are interested in that type of atmosphere, do your research before you buy into a camp. Don't go in trying to wholesale change everything. You know, and that was the one thing that I learned is I sat back and, you know, kind of observed, because I got my membership from my dad when he moved south. I knew there had to be some education that went with it, you know, and eventually it's worked out and people do understand. But yeah, you know, harvesting does and timber management, you know, Bill, like you said, man, those are, if you can win those two big battles, and if that's the way you want to run your club, then you've done something to make that progress for sure. All right.
And it's definitely paid dividends.
Absolutely.
Better bucks, and it's worth it.
Absolutely. You know, there is a period of time it takes to get to those bigger bucks, and to see that herd managed in the proper way and have your property, the habitat come back. You know, it just doesn't happen overnight. That's the thing. You got to invest time in it as well. So, all right, here we go. Stand by in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. Second segment of the show, everybody. I see a couple of comments in here as we're coming along. We talked a little bit about that in the break. So if you're listening to the podcast portion, make sure you go back and watch the live stream. That way you can catch what we talk about in the breaks as well. But before we went to break, we were talking, about the history of the camp and how you kind of got started and you starting to run that camp, the Singing Hills Club up there. But you come up with a book, and actually, like I said,
The first question I got about the book
Okay, go ahead.
is why is it called Singing Hills?
That's a great question, Dan, and I learned the answer to that after I wrote the book. And I know that makes absolutely no sense, but it was always called Singing Hills, and when I asked my dad about it, I never got a great answer from him. I think that he told me that he thought his father had named it because, it had some really beautiful hilly areas, and maybe he heard the wind blowing through the hills. And so that was my understanding. What was interesting, though, is after I wrote the book, my cousin down in Texas, who's a part owner of the camp, who hunts with us every year, he called me up and he said, "Bill, I can't believe you didn't know the story." He said, "I got it from my mother," and he said, there was an old-time song, and he actually sent me the song by a singer that I had never heard of and can't recall off the top of my head, but the song was The Singing Hills. And he explained to me that his mother had asked that question many years ago, and my grandfather loved that song, and that ended up being the basis for naming it Singing Hills. So I learned something about my own camp after writing my book.
So Singing Hills is named after a song back in the day.
Yeah, like a 1930s song. And somewhere I do have a copy of that my cousin sent me. It's pretty interesting to hear it now.
That's a good backstory.
I'll tell you what, I learned something, and I thought that there was no better answer than what my dad had given me, but it sounds like maybe he didn't even really know the backstory.
Right. Wow. Well, look, talking about the book, you decided to put a pen to paper or fingers to a keyboard and start putting down memories of the book. What prompted you to first even have an inkling of wanting to write a book about your camp?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first inkling was probably a couple years ago, talking to some of the guys that have hunted out there with us for years and years, and my cousin, who is a couple years older than me, and realizing that they didn't even have the basic history of the camp, who built it, how it was built, who was involved in the process. And on top of that, we had some old camp logs that I had stashed away. And I decided that I wanted to share that and get it written down for kind of my son and future generations, because I guess I realized at that point that there's so many stories from my own childhood that went on out there, people colorful characters that have been in and out of the camp, incidents that I probably shared with my son but very few other people. And if something ever happens to me, those will be lost forever. Mm-hmm. So I was hanging around a lot with COVID shut down, and it was winter time, and I was talking to my wife one day, and I just kind of threw it out. I said, I ought to write about Singing Hills, a book. And she was very encouraging about doing it, and so I started putting a few things down, thinking maybe I'd just publish it and keep it at camp, as just kind of a memorial log of things that had happened, and it evolved into putting together a book and publishing it, and the response has been far beyond anything I could have imagined.
Okay, so during COVID, you had some time on your hand. What was one thing, if somebody was going to say, Bill, you wrote this book, that's a great idea, I would like to do that for whatever that I want to write about, what's the one thing that piece of advice you would give them?
Well, it may sound elementary, but the hardest thing that I found of writing a book is actually getting the first words on a piece of paper or in your computer. It's like you got to start to finish it, and you know, I started writing down ideas and doing outlines, and all that stuff's important. But at some point, that has to translate into chapter 1, and if you're really committed, and I kind of set a goal for myself. I wanted to have it done before my son's birthday, which was in June. And so that was my self-imposed deadline. And once I started to get things on paper, it started to flow a lot better, and I was able to start to see how maybe this really could be a book.
Okay. You know, and one thing about the book, too, I noticed you incorporated was a lot of your personal life of growing up and how it related to camp. I mean, you know, because like you said, you lived down in Dearborn with an extended family after your mom passed away, but you used that to kind of springboard back into and incorporate that into the camp itself.
Yeah, and I think the real reason for that is if somebody, you know, having been in sales, they always told me, make sure, you know, if you see your customer, you have an elevator speech that you can give them a short, brief synopsis of why they ought to buy whatever you're selling. If I were to look at my book, what I was trying to accomplish with it was to basically paint a picture of how this hunting camp that most people think of as just kind of a, you know, a cabin in the woods that maybe guys go to for a couple weeks a year, what important part it played in my life. When I was a little kid, when I had to move away from my dad and live in Dearborn, later on in my life when I went through a divorce, when I had the death of my father, the constant that's always been in my life has been Singing Hills. Mm-hmm. And I talk in the book a little bit about my son and I, after I got divorced, we were going up to Singing Hills on a very regular basis, probably every other weekend that we'd be together. And when you spend 4 hours in the car with your kid, especially when they're getting into, you know, late puberty, into adolescence, you're talking to your children for 4 hours on that trip. And I did that when I was a young man, riding back and forth with my uncle from Dearborn up to visit my dad, and my son and I did that. And it's a way to stay connected to your children. If anybody has kids, they know that, you know, they're off playing video games, they're with their friends. How many of you get to spend 4.5 hours up and 4.5 hours back? That's 9 hours in the car with no distractions other than maybe the Lions or the Tigers game. And so it helped me retain a strong relationship with my son. And my daughter said one time that, you know, people read this, they may want to buy property up north. And I've had some people contact me, and we've talked about it a little bit. And they've talked about, you know, we're thinking about getting a camp, but my wife's not quite sure if it's the right thing to do, you know. And I said, well, have her read the book, because the central theme would be how a hunting camp is much more than what you might think it is at face value, and it really can bring a family together.
Absolutely. There's so much truth in that statement about keeping a family together, or it's a meeting place, mm-hmm. right? And when my oldest daughter was away at college, she could even come up from Chicago up to the UP, but like you said, we go up in the summer, and if we're in two cars or separate cars, but we're all going to be there for the week together. And like you said, that time is precious with your kids because they grow pretty fast.
You know, just something I just saw right now that your brother actually posted. Deer camp to him was a rite of passage into adulthood. And that's so true. It's like you talked about with riding up with your son in the car. It's not just the deer camp, like you said. It's the trips. It's the, you know, getting prepared and getting things together, and you can see the excitement in those kids as you're making that trip up there. I remember the big thing for us was always when our kids were old enough to drive Dad to deer camp for the first time. That was a huge deal for my kids. You know, they really looked forward to that day because they knew then that they had made it, and they were going to camp, if that makes any sense at
I'll
all.
bet Dad was pretty nervous that first time, though.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The first time I got in the car with him, oh, yeah. But, you know, like you said, that's what memories are made of. And, yeah, you're right. I never really thought about it that way with the book, but now that you mention it, you're spot on. I can see that clear as day now. So.
I mean, there's just so many times, you know, whether we'd be up there working on habitat improvements or hunting, and, you know, going back home, tell the story of the deer you saw or the deer you got. We'd tell it 10 different times, and we'd be discussing what do we need to do next time we come up. And those kind of discussions are just priceless because, you know, many times us parents, we're struggling to maintain that connection with our children. And like I say, lock us in a car for 9 hours on a weekend, and we don't have anybody else to talk to, so we definitely communicate more than most.
Yeah, and that's so important in with anything is communication, right? Whether you're driving up for those hours or when you're at camp, just sitting around the fire or the campfire, whatever you're doing, or like you said, you're out working on the property. It's those hours spent together that what if you have conversation or not, it's just that being together in general makes it so much more cherished down the road.
One other thing that we changed from, you know, my father and his father's generation was making the camp a lot more inclusive for not just kids but wives or girlfriends or anyone else. There was a situation that happened when I was probably in my 50s when one of the guy's wife had to come out for a emergency at home, and we had no cell service back then, and the only way for her to come was to be able to drive out to camp. And she pulled in but didn't get out of her car, and her husband, friend of mine who I've hunted with for years, ran out there, and they were discussing it out in the car. And I went out there and I said, you know, Carol, come on in. And she said, no, Bill, I know the rule at Singing Hills is females are not allowed to step inside the camp during the first week of deer season. And I thought, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Get in here and, you know, get warmed up, and you're welcome to come here anytime you want. And a lot of the old camps in that area think that's kind of it's not the right way to go, and they want to make it the boys club. But I enjoy having the families out there. I enjoy having my son, my daughter-in-law, any of the wives that want to come, and they add a lot to it. And so, you know, that's a different mentality than what the guys had in my father's generation.
Well, you know, that's the way it is at our camp. It's, you know, it's family inclusive. First week was always family, direct family, you know, and then the second week was the friends. But yeah, we had my daughters there, you know, opening day. My youngest daughter, no, I take that back. It was second day of season. First year she was able to hunt, and she took, so far in our family, has taken the biggest buck. You know, I think she was 14 at the time, 13 or 14. It was after they changed the rule where you didn't have to be 14 for firearm season. But and then my oldest daughter, she took her first deer there with a bow. She was it was her 11th, the day after her 11th birthday or 12th birthday. I think she was 12. And both my boys, same thing. I mean, I've been with all my kids when they've taken their first deer, and you know, I wouldn't give anything for it. It's simply incredible. And then the girls, or the ladies at camp, you know, they hunted as well. I mean, some of them took some fabulous deer. But you're right. It needs to be all inclusive. Family, friends. You know, it's not just a guys thing anymore. I hear those stories from, you know, years gone by. But you're right. I fully agree with you.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why, you know, you'll hear a lot of times people say, you know, my wife hates camp and wishes I'd get out of that damn camp because of the fact that, it's seen as this exclusive boys club, but they're not included in it, and it's only a place that takes the men and their family away for 2 weeks or whatever during deer season. And, I personally advocate for making it a family type of a situation and inviting people in, making it inclusive. And, that's just how it's going to be as long as I've got anything to do with it.
There you go.
Totally agreed.
And I got to assume, I know the reason, because you talk about it in the book, but that's why you come up with the name, That Hunting Camp?
Yep. Well, that hunting camp actually came from my grandmother. In the book, I go into a fair amount of detail about what it was like growing up with my grandmother, and she was a strong personality, to say the least, and there was some tension between her and my father. And my grandmother always hated the camp, and she called it That Hunting Camp, and she would refer to, and here I am, a little kid, and that's all I want to talk about. I mean, I'm like, when can I go to camp? Can I go to camp with my dad? When can I come see him? When can I get to camp? And she would just talk about it in a kind of a derogatory manner, and so growing up, it became That Hunting Camp, and I decided to name that the book.
A passive-aggressive way.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, we're bumping up here on the second break, so let's take our next break.
Before we go to break, just for people that are listening on the show, if you want to get a copy of this book, all you got to do is go over to Amazon. It's over there, and you can pick up your own paperback copy right there from Amazon.
There it is. There's the title of it, and type in Bill's name and That Hunting Camp, and on Amazon, and the price on that, Dan, is
$12.99.
There you go. And I
think there's a Kindle version of it that's
for $7.99.
$7.99. So if people don't want a hard copy.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, we'll take a quick break. We come back.
We got some questions for him.
We do. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to step outside, take our next break, and we'll be right back after this. Okay.
All right, Mark Coleman, your questions are coming up.
Mark's always got good questions for us.
Well, Mark's also eye-spying, I noticed.
Oh, I know. I saw that too.
Right?
Yeah. He's I won't say anything.
Well, not yet.
We'll just wait.
Yep, exactly. But Jerry Lambert loves your pictures of the camp.
Oh, that's good.
And Jerry Lambert, author himself, he likes the vintage camp photos. Bill, that's what he said.
I literally have books of those things, and some of them are not great quality, but one really cool thing that I noticed in going through these old camp logs from the 30s is the creativity of some of these guys. They would write poems, and they would write odes to my grandfather Louis, and they would write little stories, and then there'd be a cutout, and they'd have a picture in the middle of the little story with a photograph taped to the back. And some of the things that those guys did back then were just incredibly creative, and makes me and my generation look bad.
Those things are priceless, because you really think about what it took to get a picture back then. It wasn't like simple as picking up your cell phone and snapping 4 or 5 and go, okay, that one will work, versus back in the 30s and 40s, it was a chore to get a picture. So,
right. And developing times where, take it to the drugstore and wait 2 weeks for it to be developed.
Yeah, and hope it was a good picture when you got it back.
So if I did it right, the Singing Hills song is 1940 by Gene Autry or Bing Crosby. I'm not...
Yeah, the one that I got was not by those two, because I would have remembered those names.
Okay.
They must have done covers.
Maybe they redid it or something.
That's what I'm thinking. But that puts it about that time back then, so it might be that song. But like you said, it might not have been the original cover.
All right.
I don't know many singers from back then, but Gene Autry would be one of the ones that I would know, and Bing Crosby.
Right.
All right, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back. Third segment of the show. You got a couple of
I got a couple questions. First off, we'll start with the I Spy one. How much mushrooming do you do up there? looking for morels?
Yeah, we just learned fairly recently that there are more morels on the property than we thought. It's not a hotbed of morels, but my son and daughter-in-law were up there last year turkey hunting, and they got probably the best group that anybody's found. What we found is so far we've only found a couple areas, and they're pretty regular. I mean, every year in the same spot we'll get morels there. But I always, in the back of my mind, think that there's some secret hillside somewhere where there's just this monumental group of morel mushrooms every year, and I just haven't found it yet.
Okay.
But there's definitely better places to look, but we do have some.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll send you a picture of Mark Coleman to put up in the cabin, because if you see a gentleman, because he's eye-spying him, and he's like, I need to come up there. No, Mark, you can...
Do not give him the location.
Right? But yeah, so another question is, what's in a ballpark figure? What did it cost for you to write, edit, and publish a book?
What does it cost to write and publish it? Well, a lot of that depends on how much of the work you're willing to do yourself and, kind of your technical skills. The first thing you got to do is figure out, where you want the book to be made available, and there's different options. Amazon is the most popular because of their reach and their notoriety. But to actually get a book out on Amazon, there's a lot of formatting that has to be done that's very specific to their standards. And in my case, I got some of that done by a site called Fiverr, which is it's an Israeli site, but it's where people come on and will advertise to do small job work for people for a fixed price. And so the person who actually took my Word document and turned it into a format that can be accepted by Amazon was actually from Pakistan, and he did that for probably $500 by the time the whole thing was done. That included the Kindle version, that included the actual soft cover version, the pictures and everything else. So other people would do a lot of that formatting work themselves, and if you did that, you could certainly eliminate a lot of those costs. But if you're not really into that, you'll find that it's almost easier to hire somebody who does that every day of their life versus trying to hack through it yourself and finding out that you try to load your book into Amazon's site and it won't be accepted.
Gotcha. So there you go, Mark. If you want to start writing your book,
He's going to write the memoirs.
there you go. Another question for you. So on your property, how did you figure out who would sit where on the property? Was it seniority based, or was there another method you had where people went and sat?
Dan, you've hit probably on the most discussed question at Singing Hills in the history of the camp, is who sits where. And I would answer it, it's a combination of both. As you know, when I first came there and started hunting there, most of the people had been there many years and they had established location. So certainly wasn't going to displace any of them or try to do that. So typically what happens is a new guy comes in and, where should I hunt? And some of us will make some suggestions to him, take him out, show him the property, and he'll put up a blind there. But most of the guys that have hunted with us now have been doing it for years. They have established rifle blinds, and so the new people come in and we just find them a new spot, and over time they may move, they may take over another blind when somebody leaves or dies or whatever. Now when it comes to bow stands and tree stands, we spread out on the property. We only have about 4 of us that actually are avid bow hunters, my son and myself, and another guy, Gary, and his son. So we just kind of talked through, they have one area of the property that they tend to hunt a lot, and my son Brian and I have another area, and it works out pretty good because we've been friends for so many years. But on the rifle stand, it's a combination of legacy and just where people want to go. Probably the most difficult thing is when somebody wants to move a blind and somebody else feels it's too close to where they hunt. Mm-hmm. And we're lucky because we have 600 acres, and on a typical rifle season, we might have 9 to 10 hunters. So an average guy has at least 60 acres to hunt. But I've had complaints where somebody's moving in 40 acres away from another blind, and somebody says, oh, that's too close, they're encroaching on me. And unfortunately, that's where I have to be the referee, and sometimes that conversation ends up leaving one guy or the other a little bit upset for a while, but usually we can work it out.
So you have kangaroo court, huh?
Yeah, kind of a version of it. Yeah.
You get, well, like you said, on a typical opening, you have 9 or 10 guys for your 600 acres. And sure enough, somebody's not going to be happy where somebody moved or whatnot. But it is very nice at bow season if there's just 4 of you for the 600 acres.
How do you guys do it at your camps?
Ours used to be the same, like you said. It was legacy. I mean, you had your hunting area. Ours is a membership. You buy the membership, but then you pay the dues to keep the camp running. But yeah, when you bought the membership, you bought that previous member's hunting area. And since then, that was the biggest bone of contention on a lot of things. People driving through other areas while people were hunting to get to their area. It was constant problem. Here in the last 3 years, 2-3 years, we just made everything all inclusive. And you kind of, depending on who's at camp, you just pick an area to go to. You draw a number if there's that many people, but if not, then you say, hey, I'm going to hunt on the south end, I'm going to hunt on the north end, and you hunt wherever you want. You get your pick that way. But I mean, we've got 7 members right now, and we've got 36 blinds, hunting blinds, and I think 7 or 8 tree stands. And me and one other guy is probably the biggest bow hunter. So that's the way we do it now. So.
Yeah, exactly. And we got our typical spots that we might start off in, but I have no problems if somebody else wants it. Go right ahead. I've got several spots to go to. It's like, and technically the deer could be there, could be over here. You never could walk 10 feet behind you. I don't know.
Right. Well, we got guests that come in like Danny. We put them up on the side of M65.
Right. Yeah. That loud noise.
So it's a great spot. There's a deer crossing sign right here. They're going to cross right here.
Right.
No, I wouldn't do that to you, Danny. So, but yeah, that's always a big bone of contention. Is picking out that hunting spot. So, you got any other questions there?
Right now, no.
Okay. You touched a little bit about the photographs. To me, that's one of those prized possessions, especially those older photographs. It's just something that they're so hard to come by, and there's not many of them around. If something happens, there's an accident or a fire or what have you, you lose things like that. But for you to have that many great pictures and photos of the old camp, that's a true treasure.
Well, we're actually real lucky about it because about 10 years ago, we had the camp shut down for winter, and unbeknownst to us, we had a electrical malfunction, and the person who shut down the camp had turned off all the electricity but hadn't killed the breaker, and it turned on our pumps, and our camp literally had water flowing through it from sometime in the winter. We don't know when it started until the first people showed up in March in the spring, and they opened the door and just a flood came out. Fortunately, most of the old photographs I had brought home with me, but with that flood, we would have undoubtedly lost a lot of those had we not taken out. We had to bring in a rehab company and throw out almost everything in the camp because of black mold concerns and stuff like that. So we almost lost it, but unfortunately, I brought it home.
Well, looking at the inside of the place, it's just beautiful. I mean, it looks like so much nostalgia there. talking about the flood you had, the restoration of that, is that all still, the inside, the walls and the flooring and everything, is that all still original?
It is. You know, we were able to get all that cleaned up. We had to replace the floor, and we had to throw out all the furniture, and almost anything that was touching the floor had to go. But the walls themselves and everything else is original. And like I say, it was built by a guy back in the 30s that he was an old hermit that my grandfather knew, and he was a renowned builder that just chose to live in the woods by himself. And he headed up the project, and my dad, who was a teenager at the time, and his brothers and some other people all got involved, but he built it just to last, and it's still in really good shape for over 80 years old.
Speaking of that, looking at the front cover picture of the camp, is the main building the original building, and did you add on, or was that all at the same time?
No, it was the original building stopped before you went back to the area where the bunk beds are now. So the original camp was, I'm going to say, it probably wasn't more than 700 square feet. And then over time, they added a back room for where the bunks are, and then they actually built kind of a side bedroom and a bathroom. So now we have pretty much all of the amenities at home. My wife jokes sometimes they have better stuff there than her, but we got everything from the Keurig machine to a window air conditioner, running water, shower, refrigerator, a freezer. We've got all that stuff, but the original camp was just a wood stove on the floor and maybe 700 square feet at most.
Okay, so as the years went on, you upgraded, added on, and improved, and now there's nothing better than coming in from out in the woods to a nice hot shower and relaxing.
That's for sure.
Well, I want to talk about these bucks that you've got up over the door and up over the kitchen area. There's some tremendous racks there. Those are some nice bucks. You know, for northern Michigan, I mean, we're not real known for big bucks. And you're talking about shooting the first legal buck that come by. You guys got quite the wall there.
Yeah, one of the treasures we have is the smallest buck on the wall there, which was the first buck that was ever shot on the property in 1939, and it was by a salesman that used to call on the lumber company that my grandfather ran in Rogers City. It's a 6-point deer, and we still have that mount, which is kind of cool. As far as the rest of them, you know, we've done pretty well. We actually have some nicer bucks that didn't even make it onto the wall over the years, where maybe somebody took it with them or something. Mm-hmm. But we've actually improved the quality of the herd quite a bit in the last, I would say, 10 to 12 years, when we got going heavy on the habitat, and that makes a big difference because, as you know, I mean, you're never going to get the kind of deer up in northern Michigan regularly that you can get in the south or in mm-hmm. portions of the UP. But for us, a good 3.5 or more 8-point is really what we're looking for.
Right.
And you know, that's kind of our really nice shooter buck for us up in that area.
Okay, one of the questions that is being asked is, what year was it that the most deer were taken in 1 year for your camp?
Boy, I have to hedge on the answer to that, because obviously there's some years I wasn't there and I don't have pictures or even a log on every year. But I suspect the most was probably in the early 40s, when, you know, a lot of logging had taken place in northern Michigan, and the deer herd was very high at the time. And back in the day, my grandfather would bring in 12 or 15 hunters, and there would pretty much be hunters for the entire 15-day season. And those guys would shoot pretty much, you know, for sure any buck they saw, and occasionally take a few does too. So I suspect the most would have been when we had more hunters back in the 40s before my day. as far as when I've been around, probably the most deer have been taken were in the last, I'd say about 10 years. We had a really good run where for 9 hunters, I think 3 years in a row, we got 5 bucks that were 8-pointer or better every year. And that's with only 9 guys, and of those 9, probably only 3 or 4 of them hunt beyond that first 4 or 5 days of rifle season. And that was really a direct result of a lot of the habitat work we did. We took a real hit, though, and I believe it was 2018 when we got a snowfall in, I think it was the 18th of April, of about 22 inches. And it devastated the deer herd in our area. I talked to one of the DNR biologists who said what really happened was a lot of the does were struggling to survive because they come out of the woods after the winter. They need to feed and they need to fatten up. And then all of a sudden, 22 inches of snow drop. And so they aborted their fawns in order to stay alive. And so the fawn crop was decimated. And so we took a step back there and, started to build back up now again, which is great.
Well, I tell you what, we're coming up onto our last break, and we got some more questions. And we're going to get to one of the questions that I've been waiting for, kind
of. Okay. All right, we're going to step outside. We'll take our last break. We'll be right back after this.
All right, last segment of the show.
You're always thinking about food.
Well, when we have a guest on, we got to go down that road.
Yeah.
But it's even better now because we got a camp to talk about.
There you go. All right.
All right.
Let's save this off and get going with the last segment. We got about probably about 10 minutes left here.
Perfect.
So, just FYI. Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, and 1. All right, welcome back. Last segment, and as always, when we have a new guest on, Danny always has to get into the food portion of the show.
We do, but we actually we're going to talk a little bit before we get to the food. We talked about in the last segment about their biggest year for their deer kill, and he was saying in the 1940s, and
right,
he was thinking.
So
the question actually that's being put out there is now coming into now we have the trail cams. How do your trail cams play in choosing blind stands or looking at the deer? How's that changed hunting around the camp?
Oh, it's made a tremendous change. I remember the day my first trail cam was one where you hung a piece of string across a runway and it recorded when the string got broke.
Yep.
And from there, I migrated. I was getting high tech. I migrated to the ones where you had a roll of film in them. And if you were lucky, you could get 24 photographs on that and run into the store and get them developed. From there, of course, we went to, I've used probably most of the different brands of trail cams out there, but we've really fallen in love with these Tacticam reveals now. I think I probably got 15 trail cameras, but I think 6 of them now are reveals and probably more to come. And I didn't think we got cell phone reception up there good enough to use them, and a friend of mine said, no, he said, you ought to try them, because he says, I can use them in areas where I couldn't even get a dial tone or any cell service whatsoever. And sure enough, they got a great big antenna on them, and they work great. So we sit back at home, we put them out, we try different spots, we try to determine if we can pattern deer, we can watch fields, we can watch runways, we can do anything, and it becomes a real joy to me in the morning. You get up and check the photos, and then typically my son will text me and say, did you see the deer that was in such and such a spot? And it creates quite a dialogue, but it's added a lot, and the ability to know what's around sure helps when you're trying to figure out where to hunt.
Absolutely. I tell you what, there's nothing better than when you're getting up to camp or like you said, before you even, now that you have the cell types, just going over the photos, or like when we go up there and we pull the camera cards and we're sitting around inside the camp looking at what's on the property. But now with these cell phone types that they come right to your phone, like you said, morning coffee and see what's going across that field. That's a great feeling.
It really is. It's a real innovation, and it does help the hunting. I mean, they're a real weapon. I see some states are starting to ban them now.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before the show, and that's going to be a topic that we're going to cover here probably in the next month or so.
It's gaining steam as to the reasons why and should it be or shouldn't it be. But yeah, we talked about that before the show, and we'll definitely be talking about
Actually,
that.
I posted a link to a story that's down below the feed here right now. So once the feed's done, go down there, read the story of the article, and then comment on it if you would, for whoever's watching and listening. So,
all right, another question. It does have to do about cooking. So, who does it?
Well, we all pitch in. When I was younger, we had one guy who was the camp cook, and he actually owned a restaurant in Rogers City, and he could make anything taste good. And then as I got a little bit older, we had one of the old-time members who took over the cooking, and again, he was a guy that could make anything taste good. I remember as a kid watching him cook roast bear, and he'd say, "Bill, help me chop up some carrots and potatoes and onions," and we'd put them in the roaster. And an hour later, he'd take them out and throw them all in the trash can and put new stuff in. And he explained to me that was his technique for getting the fat out of the bear meat, which is a very fatty meat. It's almost like a duck. And so he knew all the little tricks, and the food was great. Now we share it. What I typically do the last few years is I'll send out a notice to all the guys that are going to be there on the opening week of rifle season. And I'll say, whoever would like to cook a meal, I don't make anybody cook, and there's some guys who don't cook. But if anyone would like to make a meal, let me know what you'd like to cook and what night you'd like to do it. And then I fill in, I do a fair amount. My son does quite a bit, and one of our other members, Gary, does a lot. So essentially, everybody's given an opportunity to cook a meal. There's 2 or 3 of us that are the go-tos if nobody else is doing it. But we eat pretty good out there. Nobody loses weight at our hunting camp.
No, I totally agree. I know when my brother was younger and I was younger, our Uncle Al would be the camp cook. And then when we switched over to our camp that we have now, his son actually is the camp cook for deer season. So yeah, no, we got the camp cook, and he cooks us. And like you said, we don't lose weight.
that's a good camp.
We had an interesting one this year in that one of our camp members said that he'd like to cook, and he told us he was going to cook quiche. Now, when you think hunting camp, you probably don't think quiche very often. I think we might be the first hunting camp in northern Michigan that's ever served quiche, and quiche was really good, and I'm not a quiche eater, but we had quiche, and then this last New Year's Eve, we were up there with my son and daughter-in-law and my wife and I, and we had crab legs and filet mignon. So far this year in our camp, we've gone both extremes. We've had quiche and we've had surf and turf.
There you go. Only a camp, right?
There you go. Save the best for camp.
Exactly.
Well, I tell you what, Dan, we got about 5 minutes or so left. Go ahead. I know you're chomping at the bit.
Oh yes. I totally got sidetracked by the food. So, as with typical all interviewees, we must ask a few questions. So, when you're traveling up to camp, and you're tooling up I-75, what kind of music are you listening to on the radio? Are you listening to a music podcast? What are you listening to? If you tell me the Lions, that doesn't count because that's not interesting at all. So
that really varies. When my son and I used to make the trips, when he was a young man, we would always find ourselves on Tom Petty's Greatest Hits. And that was in the days of the CDs, and I think we burned that CD up playing it back and forth because we were both fans of Petty. But nowadays, it could be anything from a podcast, it could be a sports channel for me, or sometimes just like oldies rock. I tend to stick to the oldies, and Led Zeppelin might be on there, or perhaps Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or Traffic, or some of the groups that I've always loved growing up.
That's awesome. All right, so you're up at the camp, you're out hunting, you're heading out there. What kind of snack are you going to have in your backpack to take with you out into the blind?
Probably for me, it would be lighter than a lot of our guys. I'd probably have a few miniature Milky Ways, maybe some nuts of some type. Usually, especially early in the season, I'll stay out all day long, and so I'll probably have a sandwich made of ham and cheese or something like that. A little shot of whiskey in my flask in case we get lucky and get a nice buck, and probably a bunch of waters and coffee and stuff like that. We do have one guy, though, however, who sets a standard that's hard to be rivaled when it comes to snacks in his blind. He basically runs a general store out of his blind, and he has everything, but the amazing part of it is he'll tell you, I have 35 candy bars, I have 16 cans of soup, I have beverages, and he can tell you every single thing he has. So the good part about that is if you ever run out of food, you can always tap this guy to go to his blind, and he can definitely fix you right up.
Man, it sounds like a lunch stop.
Right. Everybody be driving by picking up snacks.
Right, exactly. All right, another question. Mike and Dan are coming up to your deer camp, and we're gonna be there for dinner. What would be a meal that you're gonna make us for dinner?
Well, let's see. One of the things that I do a lot is a teriyaki salmon recipe that I'll grill on the grill outside. That always seems to go over pretty well, and that would certainly be on the short list. We also, do boring things sometimes, like just steaks on the grill. We also will do a lot of times we'll try to do venison, because some of the guys don't get to eat venison all that much. So we'll do some type of venison dish, and we got probably 4 or 5 go-to recipes on that. I got some pretty good chicken recipes too, baked chicken and stuff. My wife can make a chicken taste like nobody else, and she has about 5 or 6 go-to recipes I'm always trying to steal from her. So, it would really vary, and I might even, if I was really nice, I might even ask what your favorites are and see if we could accommodate it.
Wow.
Never heard that before.
No.
Never heard
I
that
told you,
either.
all inclusive, make everybody happy.
Yeah, I guess.
And I already know the answer to the next question. What would be a favorite story that he'd tell us? He'd probably tell us, read the book.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you what. Tell us a story that's not in the book. Something about camp that you didn't put in the book that sticks in your mind.
Oh, let's see. I'll tell you a story from this last year with my son and daughter-in-law. They went up to do some turkey hunting, and they only had a few days to be up there. They came from Wisconsin, and the turkeys weren't cooperating that year. We are hit and miss when it comes to turkeys on our place. There's some years when I can't drive through the property without scattering turkeys all over the place. And then other years you can't hardly find one. So anyway, this spring they were up turkey hunting, and they were not successful. So they were driving my John Deere Gator back to the shed on a field where we store it. And she looked over and saw movement, and of course it was a turkey. And they had the 2 dogs loaded in the back. They're in the Gator, and my son says, "Well, I wish I'd have brought the shotgun because it was a nice turkey." And she goes, "Well, let's go back and get it." And my son's like, "Well, let me explain to you. Turkey's not going to be here by the time we go back to camp. Get rid of the dogs, get my gun, come all the way back." And she said, "We're going back anyway." So they drive back. It's a 10-minute drive back. They come back 20 minutes later. Now, turkey doesn't seem to be around. And so she tells them where to go to look for the turkey. He probably went in this direction off the field. And so they start walking, and all of a sudden, they get in the woods a little ways. She spots the turkey. She tells my son, there he is. My son turns. The turkey flushes into the air, and he shoots the turkey with the brand new shotgun that she bought for him.
Wow.
So from now, I'm renting her as turkey guides to anyone who wants to pay top dollar. And, it's a story they'll remember the rest of their lives.
The Turkey Whisperer.
The Turkey Whisperer, absolutely.
Wow. Man.
Yeah, right.
You can't make that.
No, you can't.
That's good stuff.
Right?
I tell you what, we're running out of time here. Once again, Bill, tell everybody where they can find your book at, where they can purchase it.
Sure. It's available in a number of places, but the best place to get it is on Amazon. And as the guy said, you can just log on to Amazon and put in my name or the book's name, and it'll come up. And I encourage anybody who does want to read it, if you get a chance to take the time when you're done and put a review in, it's helpful to any author to have reviews out there on their book. And fortunately for me, people have been very kind, and the reviews have come in very good, so I definitely appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a good luck charm for me because I shot both my deer this year while reading it. So,
well, and I wanted to tout that. I've been waiting for this chance, but it's not just a book; it's actually a deer lure. And Mike can tell you that it does work because he had 2 encounters this year where, with the book in his hand or near his hand, the deer came out. So it's a dual-purpose thing, and that's one of my selling points on it.
The first time I was sitting in a pop-up blind at Danny's bow hunting, and of course the bow was in my lap, but I was holding the book like this, and I heard the crunch, 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 and looked up, and here come the doe. So I'm trying to put the book down, reach over, grab my bow, and everything worked out. But when I was rifle hunting, it was a little bit later in the morning, and I was reading, had my feet up, had the heater on, wasn't paying attention, and all of a sudden here come the buck across the ravine. Luckily I got down, grabbed hold of the rifle, and got it out the shooting port, and was able to take it. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a great deer lure. So it worked for me. So Danny, you got to take it with you.
I'd like to.
Take it with your turkey season, see how that works.
There you go.
Now, if that happens, I really want to know about it because they can pick up movement. But we appreciate you spending some time with us tonight promoting the book. For those of you who've been listening and want to check it out, get over to Amazon and pick it up and give it a read. And then when you're done with it, you recommend it to somebody else. Make sure you go over to Bill's social media sites. You're on Facebook. Are you on Twitter or Instagram at all?
Not regularly, no.
Okay. So go over to Facebook. He's over there, and give him a like, follow, share, and do the same for us for the show. And make sure you share the shows with your friends on Facebook and over on YouTube. They'll be out Wednesday on YouTube.
Yep.
Okay. Next week, we got anything lined up yet?
Not yet. Working on it.
We got some stuff in the works, so. That's going to do it for us this week, folks. Bill, hang on with us once we're done, and we'll chat for just a second. But for those of you who are listening to the podcast, if you're listening to it on iTunes, make sure you go over and give us a review. That helps us, and it also helps the people who help us. So that'll do it for us this week. We'll be back again next week, same time, 7:30 next Thursday night. You all take care.